The following episode contains material that may be uncomfortable, upsetting, and unsuitable for some audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Christmas Eve, 2002. In Modesto, California, the streets glowed with lights wrapped neatly around palm trees. Wreaths hung from stucco porches, and families bustled in and out of warm kitchens preparing for the long weekend holiday. Inside a modest, neatly kept home on Covina Avenue, a young couple was preparing for one of the most important times of their lives, the arrival of their first child. But by nightfall, everything would change. 27-year-old Laci Peterson would vanish without a trace. Welcome to Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, the podcast where true crime meets the paranormal. I'm your host, Cassiopeia. Every Tuesday, I deep dive into chilling cases that have baffled investigators and the eerie places where dark stories still linger. Today, in part one of my three-part series, we begin, at the beginning. Who were the Petersons? What happened on the day Laci went missing? And how did what started as a simple missing persons report erupt into one of the most polarizing trials in modern American history? This is A Perfect Life Until The Peterson Files, Part 1. Before the national headlines, before the speculation, before courtroom cameras and public outrage, there was simply Laci, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a wife. Laci Denise Rocha was born May 4th, 1975, in Modesto, California. She was the younger of two children. Laci grew up with her older brother, Brent. Their parents, Sharon and Dennis, separated when the kids were young, so her stepfather, Ron, became a steady and loving presence in her life. Now, friends remember Laci as warm, outgoing, and always smiling with a magnetic personality. She was the type of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel welcome and comfortable, almost as if they had been waiting for her. Now, Laci was a cheerleader in junior high and high school, and she wasn't just enthusiastic at games, but she was enthusiastic about people. She loved cooking, gardening, and entertaining. She had a flair for decorating, especially during the holidays, which were her favorite time of the year. And she was known to be a meticulous planner. And now she was planning for her future as a mother. In 1994, while studying horticulture at California Polytechnic State University, or Cal Poly, Laci walked into a small cafe where Scott Peterson, an aspiring pro golfer, was working. She left her number for him and said they should go out. It was bold, it was confident, and it was charming. And it was Laci. Scott called, they went out, and by most accounts, they became inseparable. Her family loved him, her friends adored him. He was polite, ambitious, and had that put-together quality that made him seem like the perfect match for Laci's structured and nurtured personality. As their relationship grew more serious, Scott decided to shift from pursuing professional golfing and focused on a business career, one that was a more grounded and stable decision. Now, Laci and Scott married in 1997, and 5 years later, they bought their home on Covina Avenue, a quiet, tree-lined street in Modesto. That year, they also learned they were expecting their first child, a boy they planned to name Connor. Laci decorated the nursery herself. Soft yellows, pastel accents, and tiny baby clothes neatly folded and organized by size. And she was counting down the days until February 2003. On the outside, the Petersons seemed like the postcard perfect couple. Young, attractive, successful, and just on top of the world. But everything would change on the morning of December 24th. Just a few days before Laci disappeared, Laci and Scott went to Salon, the workplace of Laci's sister Amy Rocha. Amy cut Scott's hair, as she did each month, and Laci chatted happily about Christmas preparations. Scott offered to pick up a fruit basket that Amy had ordered because he would be playing golf the next day at a course near the retailer. It was ordinary, completely ordinary. But sometimes the most chilling stories begin exactly that way. Sharon spoke with Laci on the phone around 8:30 that evening. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, no sign of anything being wrong. Now, according to Scott, the morning of December 24th began just as normal. He said he and Laci had breakfast together while they watched Martha Stewart and talked about their plans for the day. Now, Laci, as usual, had a full list of tasks that she had hoped to check off: mop the floor, walk their golden retriever Mackenzie, do some last minute shopping, bake some cookies for Christmas dinner. Scott, well, he planned to go fishing. Now, that is quite an unusual choice for Christmas Eve, but he claimed that he wanted to try out a new boat that he had recently purchased. He left their Modesto home around 9:30 or 10 o'clock, towing his boat along to Berkeley Marina about 90 miles away. Now, around 10:18 a.m., says neighbor Karen Servas, she found Mackenzie wandering the neighborhood with his leash still attached, but there was no sign of Laci or Scott. She assumed the dog had just gotten loose in the hustle and bustle of the holiday, and so she put him in the backyard and closed the gate. Now, at this time, Karen didn't think much of it, but this detail would actually later become a crucial piece of the timeline. Around 2:15 p.m., Scott headed home. When he arrived, Laci wasn't there, but her car was still parked in the driveway. Now, Scott didn't think much of it at first. He thought maybe she just didn't feel up to driving, being almost 8 months pregnant, and her family had come and picked her up, and she was just at her parents' house helping prepare for the holiday dinner. However, when he found her purse, her keys, and her phone in the home, he thought this was rather odd. And what he thought was even more odd was Mackenzie was still in the backyard. Scott called Ron and Sharon. They hadn't seen her. So Scott then called the police, and he told them, "My wife is missing. She was home this morning, and now she's gone." Now, Modesto police detectives Alan Brochini and John Bueller responded to the missing person call, and they would actually also become the lead investigators for the case. Upon their arrival at the Peterson home, the detectives, routinely interviewed Scott, where he told detectives that he had been fishing for sturgeon at the Berkeley Marina, approximately 90 miles from the couple's Modesto home. The detectives, on an initial kind of walkthrough of the house, they found Laci's keys, her wallet, sunglasses, and purse. Nothing else in the home was disturbed. It was in its normal, clean, and well-kept condition. But a pregnant woman, due in just a few months, missing on Christmas Eve, was definitely something they could not ignore. Now, Laci was officially declared a missing person, and one of the largest search efforts the county had ever seen began. Laci's disappearance immediately sent shockwaves through the Modesto community. Modesto, a tight-knit area, the kind where neighbors knew each other by first name, and the holiday competitions are just friendly sport. So when the news spread that 27-year-old Laci Peterson was missing, the shock was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, hundreds of Laci and Scott's friends, family, and volunteers who didn't even know them joined to help find Laci. Within days, the amount of people grew to nearly 1,000. Flyers blanketed stop signs, telephone poles, gas station windows. Helicopters searched overhead. Canine units traced trails through parks, along shorelines. Boats swept rivers and reservoirs. Laci's face, smiling, hopeful, and glowing with the joy of impending motherhood, became a national symbol within days. Now, of course, the media jumped on the story. A beautiful, young, pregnant woman vanishes from her suburban neighborhood on Christmas Eve. It had all the hallmarks of a headline. Disappearance of 27-year-old Laci Peterson has gripped the nation. Her family and community are pleading for any information. Candlelight vigils were held. Ribbons were tied on trees. Strangers wept on camera. The public wanted justice. The family wanted Laci back. But as days turned into weeks, the tone shifted. Investigators had no leads, no sightings, no evidence, no suspects, no body. Police conducted interviews, gathered security footage from the area, and began retracing Laci's last known steps. While everyone hoped for a miracle, investigators and the public began focusing on the one person who just couldn't be eliminated: Scott Peterson. Planning a vacation should be just as fun as taking one, and that's where my friend Renee comes in. Renee Monty from Magical Travels by Monty is a professional travel advisor who takes the stress out of planning so you can focus more on making memories. Renee can book any type of travel, but specializes in Orlando destinations like Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando, as well as cruise vacations for every style and budget. From expert tips to personal touches, Renee will make sure your trip is truly magical. Best of all, her services are completely free to you. Renee is actually paid directly by the vendors after your travel, so you get expert planning, insider tips, and personal service without paying one penny extra. So, what are we waiting for? Let's start planning your next adventure. Email Renee at magicaltravelsbymonty, that is MONTY, at gmail.com. Now, at first, Scott did what many spouses do: played the part of the grieving husband. He was cooperative, and after a little hesitation, he appeared on television. Somber, careful with his words, soft spoken, and pleading for help and maintaining hope. But behind the scenes, something felt off. Not wrong, not incriminating, just off. His effect felt subdued, his response measured. Some viewers interpreted this as coldness, others saw it as shock, the kind of emotional shutdown that many people experience in times of intense stress. Scott refused to take a polygraph test. Now, this may stand out as suspicious to those of you who have the mentality of, if you have nothing to hide, why refuse? But this can be detrimental, as polygraphs are not reliable. They can show false positives and implicate innocent people. They are not based on fact, they are based on emotion. So Scott seemed distant, almost emotionally detached. And another devil's advocate statement: his grief and emotions are not for us, they are not for the world. Everyone grieves in their own way, and I, for one, do my best to kind of hold my grief in and express it behind closed doors. Because I feel that we owe nothing to the world at all. Um, but his alibi, fishing in the bay on Christmas Eve, raised some eyebrows. But then came the inconsistencies. He told officers that he was fishing for sturgeon, but he couldn't remember the tides. This is unusual for an experienced fisherman. He had bought the boat only 2 weeks earlier, and he didn't tell his family about it. Now, we do know that Laci knew about the boat and was even there when he went to look at it prior to purchasing. Neighbors said that they saw Laci that morning after Scott had left the home. Now, this, of course, isn't an inconsistency with Scott and his alibi or timeline. However, it's an inconsistency with the investigation alone. Now, one of the most curious pieces of testimony came from the Petersons' mailman, who said that Mackenzie didn't bark when he delivered their mail around 10:30 a.m. And this is something that usually only happened when Laci was home. So this raised a critical question. Was Laci still alive and at home after Scott had left? Or was something else happening entirely? Then, just as investigators were combing through Scott's timeline, everything changed. On December 30th, just days after Laci went missing, a woman named Amber Frey walked into the police station in Fresno, California, and what she told police changed the direction of the case. Amber told them she was a single mother and massage therapist, revealing that she had been in a romantic relationship with Scott. What she told them next shocked investigators. I met Scott Peterson on November 20th, 2002. I was told he was single. We began a relationship. And just weeks later, he told me this would be his first Christmas without his wife. This was before Laci went missing. This was before Scott called and said his wife was missing. Now, Amber had no idea who Laci was, much less that she was missing, let alone that Scott was married. Now, shocked and horrified, Amber contacted police and agreed to help them in their investigation. Police supplied her with a tape recorder, and for weeks she recorded phone conversations with Scott. On December 31st, 2002, 7 days after Laci vanished, Scott called Amber from the vigil being held for his wife and unborn son. I'm in Paris right now, he said. It's beautiful here. The New Year's celebration is amazing. In reality, he was standing in Modesto, California, surrounded by candles and posters of Laci, pretending to mourn her while lying to his girlfriend. Those recordings would later become key evidence in the case, some of the most damning evidence against him, at least in the public's eye. Overnight, Scott's image was shattered. The grieving husband, now seen as a liar, a cheater, and some believed a killer. And in cases like this, perception matters. Whether fair or not, Scott Peterson was now the prime target of public suspicion. In the weeks that followed, Scott's behavior only fueled suspicion. He sold Laci's car, he looked into selling their home, he avoided the media, he didn't join search parties, and in one moment that was caught on camera at a vigil, he's seen smiling and talking casually on the phone, while candles burned and volunteers cried in honor of his missing wife and unborn child. To some, these were signs of guilt. To others, these were signs of emotional shutdown. To investigators, though, they were patterns. Still, and this is important, police had no physical evidence tying him to a crime. Remember, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no forced entry into the home, no definitive timeline, no eyewitnesses, nothing tying Scott to violence. But behind the scenes, investigators were quietly building a circumstantial case. They only needed one thing: a body. For nearly 4 months, there was no trace of Laci. Her due date came and went, spring arrived, Modesto mourned. Vigils turned into memorials, Hope turned into dread. Public opinion turned sharply and vocally towards Scott. But investigators waited, watched, tracked his movements, gathered evidence. Then, in April 2003, two discoveries along the San Francisco Bay shoreline would change everything, and the Peterson case would explode into one of the most notorious trials of the 2000s. In the next episode, Bodies in the Bay, I examine the discoveries that shook the nation, the arrest of Scott Peterson, and the trial that would divide America. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, A Perfect Life Until, part 1 of 3 in the Peterson Files. Be sure to follow on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Tell your friends and leave a review for that pesky algorithm. Until next crime. You've been listening to Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, the podcast where the world of true crime meets the paranormal. I'm your host, Cassiopeia. Join me every Tuesday as I deep dive into chilling cases that have baffled investigators in the eerie places where dark stories still linger. If you can't get enough of these creepy tales, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, where you can access exclusive content, early episode releases, and bonus material that'll make you sleep with one eye open. You can also grab some Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces merchandise to keep the spookiness close, whether it's a mug for your morning coffee or a hoodie to wrap yourself in on those cold, stormy nights. If you love what you hear, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, tell your friends, and give a rating to help with that pesky algorithm. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, keep your lights on because you never know what might be lurking in the dark.